Wisconsin. And that's kind of where we are. What's next? And then what's next nationally, now that the Democrats have taken control of the House of Representatives with regard to issues related to right to work or worker freedom. Mark Mix from the National Right to Work Foundation is on the phone. I tell you what, just when you think, Mark, you're in a good position to maybe retire, the American voters throw you a monkey wrench. That's kind of seems like what we've got going on here, although I don't think the Democrats can do much damage, can they?
Well, it remains to be seen. Certainly there's opportunities. In Wisconsin, you have a governor now that could issue executive orders that could expand the scope of bargaining for state employees. Probably couldn't do it for local employees, but could do it for state employees. It's funny, Vicki, I was just going over a project that I was involved back in 1990, which is how many years ago? Gosh,
a lot.
When they were trying to pass a statewide bargaining bill in Indiana at the time. Governor Evan Bayh, a fresh face, son of a former U.S. senator, had been elected governor, and he promised the unions that he was going to get a statewide bargaining bill. And we fought them for the first 3 months of that year and won that battle. But then immediately after winning the legislative battle, stopping a statewide bargaining bill, Governor Bayh then issues an executive order forcing state employees to bargain and allowing union officials to bargain on their behalf. So there's lots of mischief. Obviously, elections have consequences, and we'll see what they are. The political climate's not terrible, but it's not great either. So little chance for hope, probably not as big a threat as potentially could occur both in Wisconsin and in the rest of the country.
All right. There's some shenanigans that could be played behind the scenes with executive orders, or maybe trying to, putting us in a position of a must-pass budget. Next thing you know, the Republicans are going to be forced to sign off on something that weakens the protections of Act 10. But in terms of removing the right to work protections, we've got Janus. And so that is something, importantly, forcing people back into a collective bargaining unit is not something the state of Wisconsin would be able to do.
That's correct. Agency fee language, so-called agency fee or force fees language that would occur would be unconstitutional. So they will certainly write the language into the contract, Vicki. That's what we're finding lots of public employers are doing. They're allowing contracts to be renegotiated that include this language that says, of course, you can be forced to pay fees if something such and such should happen. And when a union steward shows someone the contract, say, yeah, see, you got to join, you got to pay fees to the union. But obviously, statutorily, they cannot pass an agency fee or force fees provision for any government employee in Wisconsin, or for that matter, across the country.
All right, because
of Janus.
But must-sign contracts could include language that substantially weakens protections of right to work, where you're essentially said, oh, well, Jim Smith here, he signed the contract that said he's giving up his rights to not pay fees. That's the umbrella we're going to see the unions all crowding under.
That's correct. If they can get this quote unquote First Amendment waiver for public sector workers, they can continue to force them to pay fees. And now we're seeing kind of the expansion of what's called maintenance of membership, and that means once you sign this card, you can't get out for a year, and the window period is a kind of a floating date, anniversary date for different workers, and so it gets real confusing. There's obviously lots of litigation on that front. Yeah, but you know what? Here's the deal, Vicki. They're still going to government for privilege. Instead of providing services to workers, they're going to rely on fiat powers of a governor or a legislature to go ahead and convince people, or quote unquote, I'm using my finger quotes here, convince people to join them. And that's not a winning proposition in the long run, no matter what. And they may be able to get more people in because they trick them, but I'd rather have members that wanted to support me voluntarily than those that I tricked to get in.
Yeah, I think that's not something that has, in terms of its longevity, it probably doesn't have a lot of longevity. And at the same time, the union will take whatever it can get. I think at this point, I doubt they'll get again in Wisconsin is a 100% contribution to pension, and the unions controlling the health care any longer. I just can't imagine the new governor wanting to propose, what amounts to an $8 billion tax increase, because the substantial portion of the savings under Act 10 came from us going back to the original statutory 50% match for pension contributions. Because, the idea is your benefits are so large that you should have some skin in the game in terms of saving for that retirement. So that's what I don't think is going to change. I can't, at least not in the short term, I can't see anybody saying what we really need is a multi-billion-dollar tax increase so that nobody has to set aside any dollars for their own retirement.
Yeah, and Vicki, I think the evidence is pretty clear, and you know this better than I do, but in Wisconsin, it seems like when you look at the impact of Act 10, obviously union officials were very, very angry, and the most militant members and union stewards and business agents of those government unions were very angry. But at the end of the day, the taxpayers and most rank-and-file folks in Wisconsin, when it comes to the reform of the so-called bargaining laws in Wisconsin, it's worked out pretty well financially and from a standpoint of those teachers in schools. Remember the days when you had to lay off everybody from first in, last out, or last in, first out, whatever it meant. And now you have schools and you have school boards up there that actually talk about, hey, it's more manageable now, right?
Exactly, because they were given an enormous amount more flexibility. They were also given the ability to negotiate lower costs for themselves, particularly on health insurance benefits. And many of them availed themselves of that and were able to plow that savings into merit pay, into attracting teachers. Let's say you need a science teacher because we're down on science teachers. This is a way to also attract math and science teachers. In fact, we actually saw a corresponding increase in math scores in Wisconsin after the substantial changes under Act 10. So I think something's going to happen, but I don't think pulling it apart is you can't pull it apart in an executive capacity. You can weaken it, but you can't pull it apart to the point where the taxpayers are going to stare down an $8 billion tax increase. Not to mention just a rule. If the executive wanted that rule, that easily trips our $10 million Reins rule in Wisconsin, and he'd have to put it before the full vote of a legislature, and that's not going to happen.
Yeah, I mean, the politics still play into this pretty heavily, and again, it's, privilege, union officials looking for more privileges again, and not that they haven't been granted extreme privileges across the country. They really have, and in Act 10, that reform of the bargaining process, my position would have been you eliminate the bargaining altogether. Like here in Virginia, we don't have a bargaining law. We have a statutory prohibition against it, but yet government employees get retirement benefits, they get pay increases, they get vacation days. Imagine that, Vicki. They actually get benefits.
It's amazing.
There's no bargaining here.
It's amazing because I thought the democracy as we knew it ended the moment Act 10 finally became law. Clearly not. Nor did Virginia go red. Virginia is blue is purple blue on the blue side of purple, and Wisconsin is on the purple side of purple, as we learned on Tuesday. Nationally, what's the picture look like now? I didn't expect to see like a national right to work law or anything because our Congress was disinclined to do that. Not to mention the Senate was disinclined to take it up. But is there anything Trump can do that can improve the prospects of worker freedom?
Well, certainly the National Labor Relations Board is an area where the president has executive authority to nominate members of that 5-member board. It's currently a 3-1 ratio. He's got another nominee pending right now. He can do some stuff there. From the Department of Labor standpoint, there's work that can be done there. Unfortunately, nothing really is happening there. On the Senate side, after the election day, we have 3 new right-to-work supporters in the Senate. We grew our support by 3 in the Senate. So could be even more, depending on how Florida and Arizona come out when they stop counting the votes out there. Generally, what happens is they stop counting when they get their winner that they want. And
right.
So anyway, that's kind of what happens there. But so it was a good day on the Senate side. We've grown support for right to work, for a National Right to Work Act, and on the House side, obviously, it's pretty hard to comprehend how that would work given the change. But then again, Speaker of the House Paul Ryan was never a big fan of right to work. In fact, the union official said of all the Republicans we could have as a speaker, Paul Ryan was probably the best guy to have because he opposed right to work. So we didn't lose a whole lot on that front, but we'll keep pushing. And the idea of freedom in the workplace and individual right to choose whether or not they want to financially support a private organization is a winning issue, and it will be. And there are other issues that come up on a kind of a regular basis that take the attention away from these things. But the blocking and tackling of freedom in the workplace is something we'll continue to do, and I think we'll continue to gain support. And
you're also looking to try to finally get the question of exclusive representation before the court, because that is the ultimate privilege the unions have. Once they have a collective bargaining agreement, they can claim the privilege of representing everybody, whether people want to pay them or not. Then they go and grouse that there are free riders, but it's by choice they choose to represent people who do not pay them dues in right-to-work states and right-to-work situations. So that's something that honestly needs to have some serious attention from the court.
Yeah, and we're actually going to be arguing a case on December 3rd in the Ninth Circuit on behalf of home health care providers from Washington State as whether or not they can be forced into exclusive monopoly bargaining units. So we'll argue that in the Ninth Circuit. Then on December 14th, we'll file a brief with the U.S. Supreme Court asking them to hear a case from the Eighth Circuit that forces home health care providers into these exclusive monopoly bargaining units. And we'll find out right away whether Justice Alito, who wrote the Janus decision, with the other four judges agreeing to everything he wrote, whether or not they're serious about going down this road of exclusive representation. We'll know, and basically we will do it for a group of employees that are, quote, government employees for the purposes of forcing them into these collectives and collecting dues prior to the Harris decision.
And you expect, the Ninth Circuit, that's always...
We'll lose there, yeah.
Exactly. I was going to say, that's where rational thought goes to die. But again, the idea isn't to have wins at the federal court, because these court decisions, number one, won't be all the same across circuits. And so it will necessitate the Supreme Court taking a look at it. It actually kind of makes it more likely the court takes up your case.
Yeah, indeed. A split in the circuit is one of the conditions that you probably need to get them to grant cert.
Thanks for coming on the show, Mark. Good to have you.
All right, Vicki, thank you.
All right, we'll be right back, guys. That was Mark Mix, National Right to Work Foundation. I'll be right back.